Welcome back to the Unapologetic Podcast. Jonathan, how are you?
I'm doing great. It's just us today.
It's just us today.
Yeah.
We're, I don't know, bacheloring it on just the two of us on, if you can bachelor a podcast, that's what we're doing.
Yeah.
How's your week going?
Week's going well. I mean, Today's Thursday, so winding down. Friday, tomorrow, I've got family coming into town. So my parents are coming in, bringing my wife, her mom. Her dad passed away several years ago, but her mom's coming in with my parents. So they're coming for a visit. Caleb, my youngest, just had his 13th birthday. So now I have two teenagers in the house. Mm-hmm. So they're coming to see him, spend the weekend with him. So getting ready for the weekend with family in town. But the week's been going well. We've had dorm Olympics that have started this week, and so we had the opening ceremonies of the dorm Olympics. Dorm Olympics are just an opportunity for dorms to compete in friendly. We hope friendly.
Is this part of the Bearcat Cup?
Part of the Bearcat Cup.
That's the overarching.
That's right. Yeah. That's right. So at the end of the year, whoever wins the Bearcat Cup, whatever dorm they get, or off campus, they can win too. Get this massive trophy and get to hang their banner in the union for the following year. And so part of that Bearcat Cup is the Dorm Olympics, a week-long event, different events. And we had the kickoff the other day. We had the gallon water jug toss. We got out here on the road and how far you can throw the water jug. I threw the opening ceremonial water jug about 14 yards, I think. Somewhere around there.
Did that hold up, or was that?
No, it did not hold. It was pretty good. It was actually pretty good. There was somebody who threw it 34 yards, a big football player. He was big, and he threw it. Yeah, it was crazy. But anyway, so that's going on. We had over 200 students out there for that, which was pretty cool.
Awesome.
Yeah, it was fantastic. Ate dinner out on the lawn together, and able to do that. So Dorm Olympics are going on. We've got a musical on campus going on now for our students. What's it called? I was going to say Susie.
See if you can get it out.
Susical, the musical.
There you go.
Going on for this weekend. I think Thursday, Friday.
Starts tonight.
Saturday.
Yep. Our girls are part of the cast, and a lot of other students and some community members, which is kind of cool that there's other people in town that are part of it. But yeah, tonight, tomorrow night, Saturday night, and Sunday afternoon. Yeah. So if I'm completely dragging on Monday morning, it's because we had back to back shows.
Yeah. So I mean, a lot of things going on around campus.
Mr. and Miss Southwest.
Mr. and Miss Southwest is tomorrow night. People are asking me if I'm coming. I want to be there. It's also exactly when Kentucky is playing in the Sweet 16, so I am torn. So that's hard.
I'll be there as part of Bearcat Days. That's also starting tomorrow. We have our big visit event. I'll probably
stop by, and that's more important than Kentucky basketball. But my dad and them want to watch the game, so probably won't bring my family up. But anyway, so a lot of stuff going on. Busy, life is busy, work is busy. But it's a lot of fun. Keeps me on my toes. I had a chance to teach class this morning, so I teach Tuesday, Thursday, and we are spending a few days on the doctrine of the church. So kind of introduction to Christianity. What is this thing called the church? And to this morning, lecturing and teaching and creating discussion around, God is a God who has always planned to work through a people, not just individual, but a people, a corporate body. So you go to the Old Testament, you have the people of Israel, and in the New Testament, we have the church. And so this is the assembly, the people of God, and try to talk through some implication of what that means for them. Christianity is not kind of a lone ranger religion, but it's meant to be lived in community. So a lot of stuff going on, getting to talk about those things, just enjoying the week.
Yeah.
But it's been full.
Well, that's a decent sort of lead in to what we were going to talk through today, which was kind of a broader. I'm going to have to try to rein you in on this because I feel like you could go a bunch of different directions and for a while. But the idea of denominationalism, which for us as a Southern Baptist, Missouri Baptist institution, it's relevant for SBU as a whole. But I also think it's a kind of a relevant topic for college students and people in general to think about. I think you can tell me if this is your take on it too, but the growth of non-denominational churches, the decline of the mainline denominations being like Presbyterian, Methodists that have been around.
Certain kinds of
main. Yeah, right. So there's this sort of been this macro narrative trend of denominationalism in decline, maybe within the culture. And And then, in the context of institutions like us, and there's lots of other universities, which we'll talk about, that are in this denominational bucket like us. So there's things that are relevant from there, but you also are historian, church historian, denominational historian. So, I mean, what would be if you were trying to set the stage for someone or thinking like a college student coming to you and saying, hey, why do denominations matter?
Sure.
Like, what's the point? I mean, what would be your sort of stump speech on that?
Well, I don't know that I have a stump speech, but I do. It's probably too long for a stump speech because that's a big question.
Yeah.
But I think a lot of times what people ask and the way they ask it, students, particularly college students, usually don't come along and say, where did denominations come from, as much as they want to know why do Christians disagree, why there are so many different types. And then they may use the term denomination, they may not. But really what they're asking is, how did we get from 12 disciples to 12,000 different groups, right?
Yeah.
They read their New Testament and they see Jesus, and Jesus calls 12 disciples to himself, and it seems to be this unified movement. And then all of a sudden you get to 2025 and you have how many different types of churches in Bolivar?
Yeah, just in Bolivar alone, right?
In Bolivar alone, right? So how did we get there? And so one of the things I try to do for students is to say, listen, throughout the history of the church, people have believed that the Bible is the Word of God, and they've tried to live their life in light of it. And there have been times where we've disagreed on some things. We agree. The church historically has, for the most part, agreed on the fundamentals of the faith, the big core doctrines that's reflected in the Nicene Creed or the Apostles' Creed, those types of things. There's a big kind of unified core doctrines that we agree on, the gospel of Jesus Christ, that sort of thing. But through the years, as people have continued to read their Bible and continue to try to live in light of the Bible and in accordance with their conscience, there's been some disagreements and some pretty big disagreements. And so the first place I take people to understand how we got to some of the divisions is to go back to one of the first. Now there's other little ones, but kind of the one, if you look at history, one of the big breaks where you get kind of two clear, distinct groups is the year 1054. 1054, you have what historians will call, and you'll find in church history books, the Great Schism.
Which is pre-Reformation.
Pre-Reformation.
Stealing your thunder on Reformation, probably,
no, that's fine.
But it's pre-Reformation.
This is pre-Reformation. Yeah. This is where you've kind of got one stream running through here. There's always offshoots and some people out here on the peripheral, but for the main part, one big group moving through here. And then 1054, you get the East and the West split. The West would be your what would become Roman Catholicism, right, and your East is your Eastern Orthodoxy. And there's a whole lot of reasons there with Constantine and moving the capital to Constantinople, all that stuff, right, which we don't have time for because this is where you got to rein me in. So that's the first big break, though. So all of a sudden you've got, one big core group, and now all of a sudden you've got a division, what becomes Eastern Orthodoxy and Roman Catholicism, the year 1054. Fast forward 500 years. Along the west, following the Roman Catholic branch, what becomes the Roman Catholic branch, follow them out. And now we're fast forwarding through a whole lot of stuff. And so if you're a church historian, I'm skipping all kinds of details, right, but you get to the year you get to 1500s. Yeah. And particularly people know the year 1517, and you get a guy called Martin Luther. Luther comes along, and he's a Roman Catholic. He's a monk. He's an Augustinian monk. And in the year 1517, he says, basically, there's some things we need to talk about as Roman Catholics. And so he nails, it's debatable whether he used a nail, but nails the 95 Theses to the door at the Castle Church in Wittenberg, Germany, and says, we need to talk about this stuff. About a year later, he comes to more Protestant convictions. But all of a sudden, when he does that, now you have kind of another break that begins. So you got Eastern Orthodox, what becomes Roman Catholicism, and now out of what Luther does, you get the Protestant Reformation, Protestantism. Now all of a sudden you got three groups. So we've gone from 12 disciples, 1,500 years later, now we have three groups emerging. Yep. And from Luther and this kind of Reformation movement, you get some other things happening. People are seeing what Luther's saying. People are seeing things for themselves. They're not all reading Luther, but people are coming to some kind of Protestant understanding. So you get this river of reform running out of Germany, but then you also have a river of reform running out of Switzerland, which has two rivers in it, really. Calvin's there. So 1534, Calvin flees France, ends up in Switzerland, eventually ends up in Geneva. And so you've got him and his kind of Reformed tradition that's emerging. So you got Luther and Lutheranism coming out of Germany. Now you've got Calvin and the Reformed tradition coming out of Switzerland. But you also in Zurich have a guy named Zwingli. So that's a third piece. And Zwingli kind of Reformed, but then he has three kind of students that break away from him in 1525. They're like, hey, you didn't go far enough. And so they start rebaptizing each other, Anabaptists. So George Blaurock, Felix Mons, Conrad Grabel, they're baptizing each other. And so now look at what you've gone from one group to two in 1054, Eastern Orthodox and Roman, or what becomes Roman Catholicism, then the Protestant Reformation, German Lutheranism, Reformed tradition in Switzerland. Now the Anabaptist movement's launching, and they're all reading their Bible and trying to practice their faith according to the dictates of their conscience. And they have some disagreements. Should we baptize believers? Should we not? Do we believe in the penitential system or do we not? They're reading their Bibles, trying to practice their faith according to the dictates of their conscience. And the last one you mentioned that I would mention is kind of a river reform in England around the 1530s. Same time Calvin's doing his thing. You've got the Church of England that breaks away from Roman Catholicism. That's, for various reasons that we don't have time to get into, not for the best reasons.
Less theological reasons than...
initially less theological reasons, but that becomes Anglicanism, the Church of England. So now now look at what's happened. All of a sudden you had kind of the 12 disciples. Now you've got Eastern Orthodox, Roman Catholicism, the Protestant Reformation, and in the Protestant Reformation, you've got Reformed and Lutheran and Anabaptist and Anglicans, and all these things begin to kind of emerge in certain socio-political situations for certain theological reasons. But the amazing thing in terms of all those Protestant groups I just mentioned, for the most part, they're all going to agree on those first tier issues: Jesus Christ, justification by faith in Christ, those types of things, and yet differ on maybe church government or
it's like your solas,
that sort of stuff is there. Yeah. They're agreeing on those things. But what you've seen is the kind of rise of different groups, and that just continues for even today. It continues to proliferate, these rise of different groups. You get into the Americas. Coming out of the Church of England, you had people even there like, hey, we need to reform the Church of England. And you had people that wanted to stay in it and kind of purify, Puritans. Some that were like, no, we want to leave it. We're going to separate, separatists. And then some of those people get on a boat, eventually come to America. Christianity's imported here, and you have all those different groups kind of showing up in the United States. Maryland, for instance, was a Catholic haven. That's where Roman Catholicism was the kind of state religion. And you get Puritans here and separatists here. And Baptists.
I even told you what I'm reading now. It's an interesting book on Isaac Backus.
And
just going through his whole journey of Congregationalist to then separatist to eventually Baptist, and how that whole, his trajectory almost follows the trajectory of the colonies and how things it's just a fascinating
so all those guys are here splintering, and then you get the Great Awakenings, and kind of religion is democratized is the way some people would say it. And so you didn't have to be an official licensed preacher from the Anglicans or whoever. You could just kind of start preaching. So you get Edwards and Whitefield, and then you get in the Second Great Awakening, Charles Finney. You get some of those people, and you just have a lot of different groups, Methodists and Baptists, that begin to proliferate. You get different types of Baptists, those that are more Calvinistic, those are more Arminian, and you just have a lot of different groups that are emerging. And in the midst of all that, I'll end here. In the midst of all that, in 1845, the Southern Baptist Convention, so a particular type of Baptist, a particular group of Baptists, the Southern Baptist Convention is formed in 1845, and that leads to eventually to where we are. We're an institution that's part of the Southern Baptist Convention.
This is, another kind of a loaded question too, but as you follow that trajectory, that split in 1050 to east and west. Eastern Orthodox Church is going to be a relative statement. Relatively stable, not a lot of splintering necessarily. Roman Catholicism after the Reformation, not a lot of breaking off as much off of that. I mean, I'm generalizing. Generalizing.
Yeah.
A lot of agree on the core, but these so many different representations and expressions of denominations or groupings has come out of Protestantism in particular. It feels like, is what it looks like through history. So what would you point to as maybe why less in Eastern Orthodox, less in Catholicism, and more in Protestantism?
The lack of a magisterium is a big one. Like you don't
decentralized.
have decentralized. You don't have. You do have confessions in Protestantism, right? You have like what is the Reformed tradition? What defines doctrinally the Reformed tradition? That is codified in things like the Westminster Confession of Faith, right? And so, but you don't have a pope. You don't have this one person sitting on the top that everybody's accountable to. But you will find that there's less splintering among those who kind of have a hierarchical type of government that moves top down, right? We know you see that clearly in Roman Catholicism because you've got the Pope, right? He's head of the chart under Jesus Christ, right? He's the vicar of Christ, and so I think that is one of the things that keeps it together, for better or for worse. In our particular world, where we believe in kind of a bottom-up type of a church government, where the final authority, final human authority in the church is the congregation. We're congregationalists.
Right.
Well, now you don't have a magisterium over top of local churches to tell them what exactly they must do or how they must believe. Baptists believe that in the priesthood of the believer, the congregation is autonomous and can operate according to the dictates of their collective conscience. And so I think that's one of the differences that you'd see, and one of the things that has often led to kind of a proliferation of the different type of groups that we see emerge. But even there, even among Baptists, you may have some differences in different groups emerging, but they're all still, well, for the most part, they're still Baptist, right? They're still going to be those who practice a Baptistic faith. They're baptizing believers, for instance. They're defining the church a particular way that's different from, say, Presbyterians. So that lack of a magisterium at the top is one of the things that I think is kind of that the reformers kind of rejected. They said, hey, the Pope is not the head of the church. Right? Christ is under the authority, and then we live under the authority of the word of Christ.
So if you're counseling, college student comes in your office, and obviously we're Southern Baptists, we want to steer students toward Baptist churches. But if someone's coming to you and saying, okay, why should this matter? Like what's the difference between and today, so taking the history piece aside, like if I'm looking at non-denominational Baptist, Methodist, Assemblies of God, why does it matter in my searching? Why should I use that how does that maybe help me look for a church if I can kind of see, if I understand what banner they're under, or how do I sort of navigate that piece when students come and ask?
Yeah, so part of that question is when you're looking for a church, you want to look for a church that reflects what you believe the Bible teaches, right? We even had this discussion today, like why do you join a Baptist church and not a Presbyterian church, or why do you join a Presbyterian church and not a Baptist church? Because I have students in different places. Well, that should be decided based on what you believe the Bible teaches about certain things. So if you believe that you should baptize infants because they are part of the covenant community, if you really believe the Bible teaches that it's kind of some continuity between Israel and the church and the way you define it, and church or children are born into the covenant family in the same or the similar way that they're born into Israel. If you believe that, you think the Bible teaches that, then you should join
not a Southern Baptist church.
Maybe not a Southern Baptist church, because the Southern Baptist churches, Baptist churches, take Southern Baptist, take the word Southern off. Baptist churches don't believe that. Right? We believe something else. We believe in a believers only church, that the only people who should join a church, the only people who should be baptized and then join a church or be baptized into the church are those who have given a profession of faith, who have given evidence that they are Christians, because we believe that the church is a believing community, right? We get that from Jeremiah 31, 34 and different places. You don't have to agree with me. You're right. That's where we are. But if you believe that, then you may not want to use the term or the phrase or the label, but you're a Baptist. I mean, if you believe in baptizing believers and being part of a church that baptizes believers and is a believing community, then you have Baptistic beliefs, right? Even if you join people tell me that they're I'm not part of a denomination, and I'll ask them, I go to a non-denominational church. I'm like, well, at one level, I'm like, okay, do you baptize infants or believers? That's what believers. I'm like, okay, so you're Baptistic. You may be non-denominational, but you are a Baptistic church. You have some Baptistic beliefs. And then what you've chosen to do is not form or not join a formal group. All right, so part of it is, what do you believe the Bible teaches? What I'm encouraging kids to do is read your Bible, have some beliefs, have some convictions, and then join a church that rightly reflects those convictions. Example, when I was in seminary, I would preach at this particular, it was a Reformed church in Bloomington, just right outside the city of Minneapolis. And I'd preached there a couple of times, got to know the people, sweet people, loved the people, but they were a Paedo-Baptist type of, they baptized babies type of congregation. And I remember being in the pulpit once and preaching, and next to the lectern was an infant baptismal, right? And I said, hey, I love gathering with you. We believe on the centrality of Jesus. We believe the same gospel. We disagree on some secondary things like whether or not you should baptize infants, to point at that thing, but we believe on the big issues. They asked me to consider being their pastor because they were without a pastor. And I said, I have particular theological beliefs, convictions about what I think the Bible teaches, and it wouldn't be good for you if I was your pastor, because the first time a family wanted to baptize their infant, I wouldn't do it.
Yeah.
Right. And so I think for the same thing, when you join a church, you're leaning into that church. You're affirming what they affirm. Churches have confessions of faith, and you're kind of stiff arming what they stiff arm. So if you, again, but a lot of people, the problem is a lot of people just don't read their Bible and form convictions about these things. And so I think a lot of these discussions, you need to find a church that rightly reflects what you or reflects what you believe the Bible teaches about certain things. The other thing about denominations that I think are helpful is that we should be linking arms with other believers to reach the nations with the gospel. We should be linking arms with other believers to disciple men and women. So we want to work with other churches in the city. We want to work with other churches in the state so that we are furthering the mission that God has given us. Yeah. We can do that better together than by ourselves. And it's funny, I think even denominational churches will join networks where they work with other churches.
Yeah, like
and that's just,
right.
And a lot of times that's simply a semantic issue. You're part of a network. The Southern Baptist Convention is not technically a denomination.
Not like Presbyterian.
We are a free collection of churches. Yep. The Southern Baptist Convention has no authority over any local church. None. We freely cooperate together. And so I think it's good for churches to work with other churches to accomplish the mission. We can do more together than we can apart.
Yeah, and that gets to can be a pithy cliche statement to say we need to be known more for what we're for than what we're against. Sure. And same kind of thing. We should be known more for what unites us than what divides us, kind of thing. But the distinctions are important because you want to worship with a conscience that's clear and in alignment with Scripture. Yeah. But they're not. In many cases, there are some cases where there are, fundamental issues that have to be understood between denominations. But in many cases, those fundamentals are true, and there's lots of things that we can work together and to unite on, even outside of SBC churches, just working with SBC churches. I mean, our First Baptist here in Bolivar is part of trying to work with other churches in town beyond the Baptist churches to reach the neighborhoods and spread the gospel. And so there's lots of things you can cooperate together on. And that conversation just has not been maybe elevated as much. And that's maybe where students or people that are just looking for a church can get caught in the piece of like, okay, I don't really care what your differences are. I just want to worship Jesus and in a church that I enjoy. Right. And that, that's on, I think, church leaders to be able to, like we've started to do here, reach out unite on the things that we can work together on.
Yeah, I think it's important not to see the disagreement among Christians as necessarily a sinful or bad thing. Right. I don't think it's sinful or bad that Presbyterians have Presbyterian churches
That's
and
a
Baptists,
helpful distinction.
and Baptists have Baptist churches.
Disagreement's okay.
Disagreement is okay.
Yeah.
And we need convinced, convictional Presbyterians operating according to the dictates of their conscience.
Yeah.
Right. We need that. We need Baptists doing the same thing. We need Methodists doing the same thing. We need Lutherans doing the same thing. We need you to read your Bible and operate according to the dictates of your conscience. And we can partner together on a lot of things, right? If we agree on the gospel, we can partner together to walk across the street and share the gospel. We disagree about the church, maybe, like who should be a member, how do we do baptism, who should be the pastors, etc. And so maybe we can't plant churches together, but we can certainly share the gospel together.
Yeah.
We can certainly oppose abortion together. We can certainly stand and fight for the sanctity of marriage together. Mm-hmm. So maybe we don't go start a church together because we're going to have some fundamental ecclesiological differences that are not unimportant, but that doesn't mean we're enemies, and it doesn't mean that we can't do other things together and cheer each other on. Yeah. If there was a solid Bible-believing Presbyterian church that was planting here in town and was going to be reaching people for Jesus, they'd find nothing but a cheerleader in me. And I'd hope that if, a Presbyterian saw a Baptist brother come into town wanting to plant a Bible-believing evangelistic church, they'd celebrate that too. And so we can cheer each other on even while we disagree, because disagreement does not mean that the other person is the enemy. Now, there are some disagreements that are different. They're bigger disagreements, right? If we disagree, if you disagree with me on the deity of Jesus, that's a different category. You disagree with me on the nature of grace through faith in Jesus, the gospel, justification, that's a different category. But if we're aligned on those kind of first-tier theological issues that Albert Mohler talks about, right, in theological triage, if we're agreed there and we disagree on the secondary issues, we're not saying those are unimportant. But they may keep us from doing certain things together, but they don't keep us from doing everything together.
Right. Thank you for doing a kind of condensed, narrowed, church history, denominational. No, it was good. That was good. So if we just for like the last few minutes kind of zeroed in on how we operate as SBU in that context, because you mentioned 1850s Southern Baptist Convention becomes a thing. SBU founded 1878. By Abner and Ingman coming out of HLG, but operating under the Missouri Baptist. It wasn't Missouri Baptist Convention at that time.
It was called like the Missouri or the Baptist General Assembly or something like that.
So we're a university that, from the beginning, has had its roots and it's under the umbrella of a denominational or collective identity in Baptist. There's a lot of other universities that have had the same thing, some directly founded by denominations, whether they're AG churches or Presbyterian or Methodist, and there's others that just kind of been loosely affiliated, but we're one that falls directly under it. And that colors a lot of how we operate. I mean, we work very closely with the Missouri Baptist Convention when it comes to trustee appointments, when it comes to support from the Missouri Baptist Convention, things that are really important in how we operate. And there's other universities that don't have that, or in some cases are trying to get out from under that piece. Because I think we're very thankful to have a state convention and under the SBC banner that is clear about what they believe and the role of Christian higher education. And it's a great partnership in some of the higher education institutions that have maybe drifted a little bit, cringe a little under their denominational banner. So, when you look across the higher ed landscape, or at least when I do, and if I'm talking to families as they're considering places to go, not to be alarmed by a denominational name or turned off by or confused by a denominational name or association from a university standpoint. Because I think what it does at its best is provides clarity in mission, clarity in belief, clarity in governance. Whereas some other places, it's easier to maybe drift if you don't have that piece. And that's I think, a blessing that we have. I don't know how you've maybe thought about it in that
Yeah,
context
I
too.
agree that it's a blessing. I would think I have thought about it a little bit. There's two things I'd say. There are denominational schools, and then there are confessional schools that maybe aren't tied to a particular denomination, but they still have a confession of faith. And so I think that the big deal for me, or the most important thing for me, I'll say it that way, is not necessarily whether or not you are a denominational school. Now, I think that's good for us, and I'll come back to that in a second. But the most important thing for me in terms of Christian institutions, looking throughout history, is to make sure that they're a confessional institution. Like, we have a confession of faith, and we believe these things. And if you're going to work here, whether you're going to teach here or be on staff here, or you're going to be employed here in any way, shape, or form, do you affirm, sign off, joyfully affirm, is the way we say it here, our confession of faith. And our confession of faith here is the Baptist faith and message. Right? So we have a confessional document that says this is what we believe, this is who we are. Now, a school can have that and not be tied to a denomination, but they're a confessional school. If you look historically, where schools started to get in trouble and start to drift, it wasn't all of a sudden somebody came along at Harvard and said, let's take the confession of faith and put it in the garbage. Instead, it was a lack of emphasis, kind of a rewriting of things. And so there's just kind of this lack of emphasis on the confessional nature. And so that there was compromise at different points. So I think if you're going to be faithful, you have to be a confession in terms of Christianity, Christian school, be a confessional institution that takes that confession of faith seriously. Thankful for a president here that does. Yep. Dr. Melson takes the Baptist faith and message seriously. He takes the fact that we are a confessional school seriously. You produced actually the video series, right?
The Baptist, that was right before I got here, actually.
Okay.
Baptist Faith and Message series. But I publicized it.
Yeah, you publicized it. Yeah.
We'll do that.
So we did that series because we take it seriously. Now, the good thing about being a denominational school is denominations have a confession of faith, like the Missouri Baptist Convention has a Baptist faith and message. Yep. That's their confession of faith. And so we have an outside organization, sort of outside. We're part of them, but they appoint our trustees. Their executive director comes to meetings, meets with the president. And so you have this group of people who say, this is who we are. Yep. We started this school long ago, and we want that school to be part of us and affirm what we affirm. And so that confession of faith comes from the Baptist faith, or comes from the Missouri Baptist Convention, which is who founded us to begin with. Yeah. And so we are accountable to them. They appoint our trustees. There comes with that a confession of faith, even down to if we change moral conduct issues in our handbook, we go to them.
To the Board of Trustees.
Board of Trustees, right, and talk about the changes we might or might not want to make. Yeah. So there's oversight there, there's accountability there, and for me, that's Christianity includes accountability, right? Yeah. There's no Lone Ranger religion type of thing. We are a people accountable to each other, accountable to our churches, and I see no reason that principle wouldn't apply to our institutions, that we are accountable to others, particularly those who started us. Yeah. So it makes sense to me. I think it helps keep us faithful so families can come here, send their kids here, and trust, man, there is a system of accountability that we fall under, and the current administration is not able to just run off in any theological direction or philosophical direction they want.
Yep, absolutely. All right. There's a lot of ground.
Was it? I felt like it went so fast.
Well, it did, but still a lot of ground real quick. Yeah, interesting. I mean, you've worked at other places, and the institution I worked at before here was an Assemblies of God university, and they're more hierarchical than Baptist. Absolutely, you've got sort of regional. I don't know, do they call them presbyteries? I think they do call them presbyteries, even within the AG. Sure. And then a General Assembly National that does set a lot of things, but they were not maybe as direct in trustee appointment, as we are here. And then you've got other ones out there. I was reading about SMU, Southern Methodist University, recently. They were started by Methodists in the early 1900s, and it's in their articles of incorporation. And now they, about 5 years ago, started a process of suing and trying to get from under that piece. And that's because the institution has drifted. I think it was primarily driven by LGBTQ stances within the denomination. Methodists weren't at that point willing to bend. They still were holding tight to biblical convictions on it. So SMU was kind of wanting to get out from under that piece, but I mean, the Methodists are saying no. Like we founded you. Your stand is going all the way to the Texas Supreme Court to
It's fascinating.
go through it.
It's fascinating to kind of throw off the yoke of the people who formed you. I have thoughts on there. That's probably a whole nother episode. But, I like the fact that we are accountable to the Missouri Baptist Convention, and there's always going to be problems there. You're always going to have issues there because Christians are sinful and there are complexities in a fallen world. But I think the pros outweigh the cons in terms of being accountable to a denomination.
Yeah, I agree. And we have great. So some of those things just become, working relationships and personal pieces too. We've got great leadership within the Missouri Baptist Convention aligned with us at SBU that makes it a pretty seamless piece for us right now. So that's great. That's good. Well, thank you, Mr. Historian, for your.
I dabble in it. I love it. I mean, there are some guys out there that really know. I mean, if you want to read on any of this stuff, just as listeners, you read Thomas Kidd, read Michael Haykin, Haykin, Michael Haykin, fantastic. Obi Tyler Todd is a historian that I'm really starting to enjoy. Pick up Bruce Shelley, History in Plain Language is really good. So there's just some authors out there, and you can go back and rewind and figure out everybody I just said, but there's some really good 2-volume set. Last one I'll mention, Justo Gonzalez, The Story of Christianity, and you can trace out some of these things for yourself.
Yeah, it's important for people to spend some time thinking about it because the denominations aren't going away and different kinds of churches aren't going away, and to be thoughtful and understand some of the context as you're searching and finding your place is important. So
that's good.
All right. Well, thank you for joining us on this episode, and we will be back next time.